Welcome, everyone, for the last Rising Tide Foundation session of the year of 2024. And what better way to exit 2024 by taking an assessment of some broad strokes of the last multiple thousands of years, which is usually what happens, and to go beyond the temporal into the universal and back into the temporal, as Quan is often wont to do. And I think that this is going to situate the terrain in which we enter 2025. Last week, this class here, as people may know, was not originally scheduled. We weren't going to do any class today. However, after Jerry's wonderful presentation on the Chronicles of Novgorod last week and the dialogue that came out of that, I was just very, very interested in hearing what Quan had to say in greater detail, since he really offered quite a few very, very interesting offerings that I think give us a better insight into the character, the cultural terrain of that which is shaping the considerations of the intelligentsia of Eurasia, which again, as Jerry had made a point very clearly, just taking a 3-minute excerpt from that prolonged Tucker Carlson Putin interview of almost a year ago now, you could just build a whole university curriculum, a revolutionary curriculum off of a 3-minute segment. And Jerry was just scratching the surface. So we're going to continue this theme a little bit more. And, we were introduced to some very important players in history. I'm going to let some people in here. Alexander Nevsky was a big player in this story. It tied into Charlemagne in some surprising ways, some processes going on around Harun al-Rashid and even the Tang Dynasty. And Alexander Nevsky's vision, his program, didn't die with him. It continued in various ways after he died, and I'm curious to see how that worked out. And so Quan will be doing today's presentation to both pick up on that thread and also feed a lot of curiosity and a lot of discussion, which we're going to have after his formal presentation is over. And like usual, I ask people to raise your digital hand, leave leave your name in the chat box, and I'll call upon you accordingly. So without further ado, Dr. Quan Le.
Thanks, Matt. So I would like to start my presentation with something that is closer to us. I will take 2 minutes for that. Let's not forget that the KFC Azrael, the Kakistocratic feudal conglomerate of the Anglo-Zio-American establishment, most fear event or their nightmare is the reunion of Germany, Russia, and China. Because either the three are together or two of the three are together, it would put an end to their thalassocracy and their financial oligarchy. You might find strange that I start with that, but our discussion today, having as hero Alexander Nevsky and his children, is directly related to that. And I would like to remind everyone that in July 2024, this year, Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping agree upon the grand endeavor of a Eurasian security architecture. And in January 17, 2025, meaning in about 3 weeks, there will be the signature of a military alliance between Iran and Russia. And I think that you all realize that January 17 is very symbolic. It's 3 days before Trump's inauguration. That being said, I would like Matt to play the first 13 minutes of Eisenstein film from 1945, Ivan Grozny. And please pay attention to the dialogue because it has a lot to do with our discussion.
святаго Духа. Венчается на царство царским венцом великий князь и государь Иван Васильевич. И нарекается боговенчанным царем московским и всея великия Руси самодержцем.
Московский князь не имеет права на царский чин.
Европа не признает его царем.
Сильно будет, признают.
Впрочем, некоторые его подданные не очень восторгаются этим венчанием.
Недовольство тех вельмож понятно, что кузен великому князю Вольдемар Старицкий с матерью. Венчание Иоанна царем усложняет их путь до трона московского.
Но есть как будто и сторонники Иоанна.
То родственники невесты великого князя.
Не великого князя, а царя. Уже царя. Святаго Духа. О, боговенчанный царю, прими от Бога скипетр сей. Прими, сын мой. Прими от Бога державу силу. Прими, сын мой. Ныне и присно, и во веки веков.
Венчанному царю Иоанну Васильевичу сия
России, великий князь Московский, венец царя всея Руси на себя возлагает. И тем навеки многовластию злокозненному, боярскому на Руси предел кладет. Отныне русской земле единой быть.
На боярскую власть руку поднимает.
Но дабы русскую землю в единой длани держать, сила нужна. А посему отныне учреждаем мы войско, служивое, стрелецкое, постоянное. А кто в войсках тех государевых сам не сражается, тому в великих походах царских деньгами участвовать.
На свою же голову свою деньгу нести.
Также и святым монастырям великими своими доходами отныне в воинском деле участвовать. Ибо казна их множится, а русской земле пользы с того нет. Нужна сильная власть, дабы гнуть хребты тем, кто единству державы российской противится. Ибо токмо при едином, сильном, слитном царстве внутри твердым можно быть и вовне. Но что же наша отчизна, как не тело, по локти и колени отрубленные? Верховья рек наших, Волги, Двины, Волхова под нашей державой, а выход к морю их в чужих руках. Приморские земли отцов и дедов наших от земли нашей отторгнуты, а посему в день сей венчаемся мы на владение теми русскими землями, что ныне до времени под другими государями находятся. Два Рима пали, а третий, Москва, стоит, и четвертому Риму не быть. И тому Риму третьему, державе московской, единым хозяином отныне буду я один.
Папа не допустит, император не согласится. Европа не признает.
Сильным будет, все признают. Надо, чтобы силен не был.
День Симеона Богоприимца свадьба назначена. Учиним же свадьбу всему хозяину.
Чему такая привилегия Иоанна?
We can stop here. Okay, so in those 13 minutes, you have the summary of the history of Russia for the next 500 years. Because the day was January 1547, and the place was the Cathedral of the Domitian of the Kremlin. So Ivan IV was 16 years old, and he was crowned for the first time Tsar of Russia. He was the first crowned Tsar or emperor of his family. His grandfather and his father, Vasily III, his grandfather Ivan III and his father, Vasily III, sometimes used the title of Tsar or Caesar. The closest pronunciation of Caesar to the original Latin is the German Kaiser, because the original pronunciation is probably something that sounds like Kaiser. So the Kaiser of the German is closest, and Tsar of the Russians is the second closest to Caesar. But Ivan IV was really the first crowned emperor of his family, even if his grandfather Ivan III and his father Vasily III sometimes used that title. The old man who was the metropolitan bishop of Moscow was Macarius, and that Macarius helped a lot Ivan during his rule for conquering many new lands for Russia and for the administration of the kingdom. The young woman to whom Ivan will marry 2 weeks later on February 3, 1547, is Anastasia Zakirina Romanov. So when I say that that scene is a summary of the next 500 years of Russian history, because that lady Romanov is from the same imperial Romanov family who will rule Russia from 1613 to 1917. And you notice that in the speech of Ivan, you have everything that is about the duties and the endeavor of a great sovereign. Control the oligarchy, expand the economy, peace and order, and put limits to the intrusions of foreigners. Also control the church and what I would call the deep state, even if it's maybe a little bit anachronistic to use the word deep state for 1547, but I think you understand what I mean. So from now, I would like to go back a little bit on the story, on the history of his family. We are in 1547. Let's not forget that Yuri Dolgoruki, his ancestor, created Moscow in 1147. So exactly 4 centuries before Ivan IV coronation. You all know who is FDR? Well, I suggest another acronym, YDR, for Yuri Dolgoruki. Okay, so I say Yuri Dolgoruki or YDR, Y for Yuri, D for Dongo, R Ruki. Dolgoruki is a nickname. It means a long arm. Why? Because he had a lot of influence during his time. And he was an ancestor too of Alexander Nevsky. So I just want to remind a little bit the rulers that Jerry told to us last week. I divide them as the pioneers, the conquerors, the achievers, and the fall. In the group of the pioneers, we only have one, Rurik, who ruled from 1862 to 1879. The conquerors, Oleg the Wise, ruling from 879 to 912. I remind you that he conquered Kiev in 1882. And Kiev is a city that has been created around 450. So when Oleg the Wise conquered Kiev in 882, the city existed for about 4 centuries. After that, Igor, who was not Oleg's son, but was Rurik's son, ruling from 912 to 945, with his mother, Olga, as regent from 945 to 962. And the son of Igor, Sviatoslav, ruling from 945 to 972, with his mother. So Olga was not Igor's mother, but Igor's wife, and the mother of Sviatoslav, who ruled from 945 to 972, with Olga as regent from 945 to 962. I remind everyone that Jerry told us that he destroyed the kingdom of Khazaria in 968. The three group of achievers, well, the group of achievers has three people. Vladimir the Great, ruling from 972 to 1015, and with the big event in 988 when he converted to Christianity. His son Yaroslav the Wise, ruling. What is remarkable under his reign is that the end of his life happened the Great Schism of 1054, when the Patriarch Michael Kerularios of Constantinople has been excommunicated by the papal legate called Humbert de Moyen-Moutier. Okay, he was a Frenchman. And he also, let's say, directed some raids, some attacks against Constantinople in 1043, 1044, and 1045. What is remarkable that is because of those attacks against Constantinople, his fifth son, Vsevolod, will marry Anastasia of Constantinople in 1045. And it's very important in the history of Russia because it was the first time that the Russian princes wouldn't have in their family a princess of imperial blood from Constantinople. And that wouldn't exert a major effect on them, because you will see that in the following generations, the Russian identity has been strengthened each time that they came closer to the imperial family of the Eastern Roman Empire. And you also remember that in the excerpt of the film by Eisenstein, Ivan IV talked about the identity of Moscow as the third Rome. The first Rome being Rome, of course, the second Constantinople, and the third one, Moscow. So in 1045, the fifth son of Yaroslav the Wise, Vsevolod, married Anastasia of Constantinople. And it brings us to Vsevolod's son and Anastasia's son, Vladimir II Monomachos. Monomachos is a Greek name, and it means the lone fighter. And that Greek name is because of his maternal grandfather, the Eastern Roman Emperor Constantine IX, who ruled between 1042 and 1055. And that Vladimir Monomachos will create the city of Vladimir in 1108. So Vladimir Suzdan, that principality, would be very important in the future of Russia, as 39 years later, 1147, Yuri Dongoruki, Vladimir Monomachos' son, will create the city of Moscow. So here, before the fall of Kiev, let's say the destiny allowed the preparation of the future of Russia by the creation of the city of Vladimir in 1108 and the creation of the city of Moscow in 1147 by the son, Vladimir, by the father, Vladimir Monomachos, and by the son, YDR or Yuri Dongoruki. MTV, okay, that's an easy way to remember. Mstislav I is the elder son of Monomachos, and the state of Kiev disintegrated after him, and he ruled between 1125 to 1132. So his reign was quite short, even if later on you will have new princes of Kiev, but they would not have the same kind of authority and of power than before Mstislav I or MTV I. As I said, the other son of Vladimir Monomachos was YDR, Yuri Dongoruki, He was born in 1099 and he died in 1157. He was Grand Prince of Kiev, Susdan, and Rostov between 1149 and 1157. And as I said many times, he created Moscow in 1147, 400 years before Ivan IV coronation in 1547. Yuri Dolgoruki would have two major sons, Andrei Bogolyovsky. Andrei Bogolyovsky would sack Kiev in 1169. And we can say that from 1169, Kiev is no longer a meaningful city in the history of Russia. And the other son of Yuri Dolgoruki, that is important one, even if it's the 10th or the 11th son of Yuri Dolgoruki, but he was the second son who had some meaning in the history of Russia, was Vsevolod the Big Nez. Okay, it was his nickname, the Big Nez, Bolshoye Nezdo. And why he was nicknamed the Big Nez? Because it was thanks to him that the city of Vladimir would be a major city in the history of Russia. So the Big Nez in the meaning that he gave a big city to the Russians. So he was Prince of Vladimir as 22 years old, and he ruled from 1176 to 1212 during 36 years. So Vladimir has been founded in 1108 by his grandfather, Vladimir Monomakos, and he was also the father of Yaroslav II, who will choose to side with the Mongols, and he is important as also being the grandfather of Alexander Nevsky. Okay, so Vsevolod the Big Nez, or I would call him the Big Nez, father of Yaroslav II, who chose to side with the Mongol, and grandfather of Alexander Nevsky, who was victorious against the Sweden army and the German crusaders, respectively in 1240 and 1242. And now I would like to make a parenthesis in relation with the Tang Dynasty, because let's not forget that the Principality of Vladimir Susdan and of Moscow was a kind of land that is surrounded by a lot of Turkic people. Okay, because if try to imagine a big triangle, okay? On the northwestern side, you have the Gulf of Finland. On the eastern side, you have the city of Kazan on the Volga River. The Volga River is a very long river of 3,500 kilometers. And you have a horizontal line of the Volga River for about 1,000 kilometers. And you have a vertical north-south direction of the Volga River for about 2,500 kilometers, ending in the Caspian Sea. And Moscow, it's just about 250 kilometers south of the horizontal part of the Volga River. So it's just to give you an idea that Moscow is on a very flat geography. So you know perfectly that one of the reasons why Russia is so big, first, is because of the courage and of the capacity of the Russians, of course, because the men have priority in the explanation of the greatness of a state, but also because of the geography, because the Russian needs a very big land to protect the core of their state around Moscow. That's why they conquer all the rest of Siberia, let's say between 1550 to around 1900. Okay, it took about 4 centuries for them to take the 14 million square kilometers of Siberia. So you know that Russia is a land of 17 million square kilometers. The Asiatic part is 14 million square kilometers, and the European part is about 3 million square kilometers. So I am coming back to the Tang Dynasty, which ruled China between 618 and 907, because in 630, the Tang conquer General Li Jing of the Tang Dynasty conquered the Eastern Gokturk Empire, and in 643, Emperor Tang Taizong conquered the Western Gokturk Empire. Most of them submitted to the Chinese Empire, but there was also a lot of them who fled to the West. And those who fled to the West would be the 24 tribes of the Oghuz Yapgu state. Okay, Oghuz, O-G-H-U-Z, Yapgu, Y-A-B-G-U state, meaning the state of the king, or the society of the king. And there was 4 groups who will be important for us in the history of Russia. The first group, of course, is the Khazaria kingdom that Jerry talked about last week, who ruled the south, the part just north of the Black Sea, between 630 and 968. The second group, what is important, had many names. Okay, they were called the Pecheneg, P-E-C-H-E-N-E-G. That was their official name. They were also called the Cumans, C-U-M-A-N-S. They were also called the Polovtsi, P-O-L-O-V-T-S-I. They were also called the Kipchak, K-I-P-C-H-A-K-S. Anyway, that group were the nomadic people who interacted a lot with the Russian principalities. The other group, the other 2 tribes of the Oghuz Yapgu principality, which are important for us, is, of course, the Kinnik tribe, who will create the Seljuk Empire, and the Kayi tribe, who will create the Ottoman Empire, having ruled between 1299 and 1922. Okay, it was an empire which lasted for 6 centuries. The other thing that I want to say too is that before going back to Russia, I want to mention 4 major military victory of the Tang Dynasty who had a big impact on the history of the world. I already mentioned 2 of the 4 major history: 630, victory over the Eastern Gokturk Empire, and 643, victory over the Eastern Gokturk Empire. The third victory of the Tang Dynasty was in 663. It was the victory of Baijiangkao in Korea, or to be simpler, the victory of the Battle of the Baek River, B-A-E-K. And it was the Chinese Tang Empire with their Korean allies, the Silla Kingdom, defeated the Japanese under the name of Yamato Kingdom, and the Korean allies, the Baekje Kingdom. The Japanese returned to Korea only 929 years later, during the period of 1592 to 1598, to be defeated once again by the Chinese Ming Empire and their Korean allies. And the Japanese returned a third time to China in 1933, 1,290 years after 663, after the 663 Chinese-Korean victory, and 335 years after the 1598 Chinese-Korean victory. Some people have bad habits. I hope we will not have to beat them a 4th time. But that being said, and the 4th major victory of the Tang Dynasty has a relation with the Carolingian dynasty. On the big frame of the Eurasian landscape, okay? Because my presentation is mainly on the kingly way of Alexander Nevsky children, but within really the big Eurasian landscape, because let's not forget that I started my presentation by the promise between Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping this summer, July 2024, to establish a Eurasian security architecture. And from the Eurasian security architecture to establish a global security architecture. So we have to see things in a very broad perspective. So the fourth major victory of the Tang Dynasty happened in 717. It was the battle called the Battle of Aksu, A-K-S-U. Aksu is a city at the western border of the Chinese province called the Xinjiang province. So at the Battle of Aksu, having stopped the Muslim advance to the east, 15 years later, in 732, Charles Martel, Martel means the hammer, the grandfather of Charlemagne, was victorious at Poitiers, having thus stopped the Muslim advance to the west. So it was practically almost at the same times, and those two major battles, one in the east, Aksu 717, and the other one in the west, Poitiers 732, play a major role in the history of mankind. Now I'm coming back to Moscow. So we left the fact that Zelovod, the big nest, had a son called Yuri Dongoruki, and we were at the fact that MTV Mstislav the First was the last prince of Kiev, and that Vladimir Monomakos created Vladimir in 1108, and Yuri Dongoruki created Moscow in 1147. Just before going back to that family, I would like to remind everyone that in May 31, 1223, at the Battle of the Kanka River, K-A-N-K-A, the Mongols was victorious against a coalition of Russian princes. They would come back in 1236, and in 1236, between 1236 and 1242, they would manage to take what is called Ruslan at the time of Kieven Rus. And the father of Yuri the father of Alexander Nevsky, Yaroslav II, chose to collaborate with Batu Khan. And here I would like to make an epistemological parenthesis. For those who listen sometimes to my speech, I always speak of the epistemological triangle. The epistemological triangle for me is made by the capacity to have good mythology on one side, on the other side, the capacity to have good capacity to see the facts, and awareness. The awareness to make the difference between the facts and mythology. I say that because the father of Alexander Nevsky was capable to see that the Mongol cannot be defeated at that moment, and he chose to side with Batu Khan, probably save the Russian state. Because it is one thing to be courageous and to go against those who invade us, which is perfectly normal, but it's another thing to be suicidal. So Yaroslav II was bright enough not to be suicidal and chose the right side of his history at the time. And that's why it gave his son, Alexander Nevsky, the resources and the capacity to go against the Sweden king, the king of Sweden, in July 15, 1240, at the Battle of the Neva. Alexander Nevsky was only 19 years old at the time, since he was born in 1221. And he was victorious since he got the nickname Nevsky, meaning the guy from the Neva River, okay, because of his victory on the Neva River, which is where you have St. Petersburg right now. 2 years later, about 5 weeks before his 21st birthday, on April 5, 1242, he was victorious against the German crusaders. So, and because of the right choice of his father, Yaroslav II, he was capable to maintain the security of the western border of Russia. So the father, Yaroslav, because he had a geopolitical understanding that the Mongols were not conquerable at the time, was unconquerable, protected the eastern border of Russia, and his son protected the western border of Russia. And Alexander Nevsky has been elevated to the status of a saint of the Russian Orthodox Church the same year than when Ivan IV has been crowned as Tsar of Russia, meaning in 1547. Okay. So the battle on 1242, April 5, 1242, against the German Crusaders was called the Battle on the Ice of Lake Peipus when he was almost 21 years old. So he was also Prince of Novgorod between 1236 and 1240, and between 1241 and 1256, and between 1258 and 1259. He was Grand Prince of Kiev in 1249 to 1263, and Grand Prince of Vladimir between 1252 and 1263. In 1248, 1249, Alexander Nevsky and his older brother Andrei went to the Mongol court in Karakorum. Karakorum is at the exact geographical center of the country called Mongolia nowadays. And it's about 5,500 kilometers east of Moscow. So it was a very long travel. So it's not a surprise that it took a year, okay? It was between 1248 and 1249. Let's not forget that when he went to the court of the Mongols in 1248-49, he was basking in the glory of his victories of 1240 and 1242. So the great-grandson of Genghis Khan, Sakta Khan, who will be emperor of Russia for the Mongols, became his sworn brother. And the fact that Alexander Nevsky was the sworn brother of the future overlord of Russia was a very important factor that would give to his family a preeminent position among the Russian princes that would prepare the future of the Russian state. And the genetic study that has been done by Chur, that is his family name, that is an unusual family name, I would spell it Z-H-U-R, and companions in 2023, made a genetic study of the Russian princes, and they discovered that there were 3 components in the blood of those princes. One, the first component is from Eastern Scandinavia. It's not a surprise. Rurik was a Viking. And also from the Eurasian steppe, meaning the Turkic people who were around Moscow, from the Volga River. And a third component is East Asian, which is not a surprise too, because there were many intermarriages during the Mongol period with the different princely families of Ruslan. Okay, I wouldn't call it Ruslan because Kiev is no more, and Russia, in the modern sense of the term, was not yet at the time. Okay, so from them, there was a notion that was called Ruskaya Zemlya, and Ruskaya Zemlya is the expression that was called for the Ruslan at that period. So we are at with Alexander Nevsky, his 2 victories. He died in 1263, and his son his youngest son, Daniel Alexandrovich, was 2 years old when he died. Since Daniel Alexandrovich was born in 1261, and he would die in 1303. Well, that Daniel would be given the city of Moscow, and he would be Prince of Moscow between 1281 and 1303. So since he was born in 1261, he became Prince of Moscow when he was 20 years old. And because of the special relationship that his father had with Sakta Khan, his principality was, let's say, left alone, let's say. And he had two sons, the first called Yurik, who ruled Moscow between 1303 and 1325. And the second son would be more important for the future of Russia. It was Ivan Kalita. Kalita meaning the money bag. I talked a little bit about him last week. And brother of Yurik and son of Daniel and grandson of Alexander Nevsky. In 1325, he would move the seat of the Russian Metropolitan Church to Moscow. In 1328, he would get the responsibility of tax collector for the Mongols on over the other Russian principalities, and because of that, he would build enough money to guarantee the future of Moscow. And in 1331, the Princess of Moscow became also Princess of Vladimir Suzdal. I just want to make a parenthesis on the history of the Church of Moscow, because for me, the church is the intellectual and mythological component of a state. Okay, if I come back to my epistemological triangle, you have the mythology, the facts, but also the awareness of the difference between the mythology and the facts. The role of the church or of any religion or faith or mythology is precisely to construct the ideal, the dream, the future, and the spiritual legitimacy of the political action of the princes. That is why I stress it as very important component of the Russian state. But what is different with the Russian state, if you compare it with the Western Catholic Church, is that because of how the Russian Church evolved, the political power has always been above the power of the Church, and explain why. You remember that Emperor Constantine I promulgated the Edict of Milan in 313 for the toleration of Christianity, and from 325 with the Council of Nicaea, he defined Trinitarian Christianity as the religion of the empire, but not yet the only official religion of the empire. We have to wait for the Edict of Thessaloniki in 380 for Christianity to be the exclusive religion of the Eastern Roman Empire. And why do I mention that? Because the Patriarch of Constantinople always had to get the approval of the Eastern Roman Emperor. And since the Russian Church is a branch of the Church of Constantinople, the Russians in the Russian state, the political power is always above the power of the Church. Contrary to the West, because of the collapse of the Western Roman Empire in 476, the authority of the Church also cover the political domain. And I would say that the church has much more authority in the West than at Constantinople or later on at Moscow. And what happened in 1054? As you know, the Great Schism between Rome and Constantinople. 1448, when I say metropolitan, you understand that it's the metropolitan bishop, okay? The metropolitan Jonah in 1448 declared that the Moscow church is autocephalous, okay? Autocephalous means that the Moscow church became independent of the church of Constantinople. And the idea of the Third Rome, as Moscow as the Third Rome, has been, let's say, consolidated by a monk called Philotheos of Pskov. Pskov is a city southwest of Novgorod, and Philotheos is written Philotheus, and he was born in 1465 and he died in 1542. And when in May 1453, Constantinople has been conquered by the Turk, it gave a kind of validation to the 1448 proclamation that the Church of Moscow is from now on autocephalous, meaning independent, because it has been perceived as a kind of divine punishment for Constantinople. So I would quote a very short declaration from Philotheus of Pskov. Moscow alone shines over the earth more radiantly than the sun because of its fidelity to the faith. So that's part of a big thing concerning the mythology of the identity of Russia. Let's not forget that Zelovolod Mary Anastasia of Constantinople in 1045, and in 1572, Ivan III with Mary Sophia Palaiogina of the Palaiologos dynasty, and she was a niece of the last Roman emperor, Constantine XI, and Ivan III began to use the title of Caesar or Tsar, but it was his grandson who would be the first crowned Tsar of Russia, as we saw. But I want to mention that from Yuri to Kalita, who ruled from 1325 to 1340, you also have Simeon, the son of Kalita, who ruled from 1340 to 1353. And you have Kalita had another son, Ivan II, who ruled between 1353 to 1359. And the son of Ivan II was the famous Dmitry Donskoy, who ruled between 1359 and 1389. Because why I say famous? Because Dmitry was victorious against the Mongol in 1380. Even if that victory will not kick out the Mongols, you will have to wait for another century in 1480 for the Mongol rule to end. But it was symbolically an important victory, and that's why he was nicknamed Donskoy, meaning of the Don River, like his ancestors was nicknamed Nevsky, of the Neva River, because he was victorious against the German Crusaders. And Dmitry was victorious against the Mongol on September 8, 1380, at the place called Kulkovo, Kulikovo. It's just north of the Azov Sea. So, and after Dmitry Donskoy, you have Vasily I, having ruled between 1389 to 1425. Vasily II, having ruled between 1425 to 1462. And now we arrive at Ivan III, the grandfather of Ivan IV, having ruled between 1462 and 1502. He was born in 1440. So when he began to rule, he was 22. So he married in 1472 Sofia Paleologina, and he conquered Novgorod in 1478. And there was the Battle of the Ugra River, which lasted 2 months between beginning of October to November 28, 1482. And from that moment, the Mongol overlordship ended in Russia, and it lasted from 1236 to 1502. Why 1502 and not 1480? Because in 1502, a branch of the cousins of the Mongol sovereign of Russia, the branch of the Astrakhan Khanate, will attack them and will put a definitive end to the rule. And after that, you will have the Crimea Khanate, which was a cadet branch of the Mongol having ruled in Russia, who will rule on the Crimea Peninsula and the land around it till the end of the 18th century. So the Mongol presence in Russia lasted till the rule of Catherine II the Great. And that family was called the Giray family, Giray, and it was a state which was a vassal state of the Ottoman Empire. So you have Vasily III consolidating the word of Vasily of Ivan III, ruling from 1505 to 1533, and finally Ivan IV, ruling from 1533 to 1584. After that, you have a period of trouble from Boris Godunov from 1598 to 1605, and to the end of the times of trouble between 1598 to 1613. And the 1613 was the first year of the rule of Michael Romanov, the first Tsar of the Romanov imperial family, who will rule Russia till 1917. And I remind you that we saw in the movie by Eisenstein that Ivan IV married Anastasia Romanov in 1547, and that's why Michael Romanov got his legitimacy to keep on the rule of Russia after the end of the Rurik. Ivan IV was not the last Rurik, because his son Fedor will rule between 1584 and 1598. And during the times of trouble, there was a last Rurik who will rule. He was Vasily IV. Between 1606 and 1610, and Vasily IV, it was from a branch of the Rurik called the Shuisky. The Shuisky is from the brother of Alexander Nevsky. Alexander Nevsky had a brother called Andrei, and that branch of the Rurik, the Shuisky, were the offspring of Andrei, the brother of Alexander Nevsky, the third son of Yaroslav, since Alexander Nevsky was the second son of Yaroslav II. I would like to read an excerpt concerning the Mongols. There's a very interesting book written by a guy named Jack Weatherford, who has been published in 2004, 20 years ago. And the title of the book is Genghis Khan and the Making of the Modern World. Let me find this. And I would like to read an excerpt. Okay, I start the quotation. The book suggests that the Western depiction of the Mongols as savages who destroy civilization was due to the Mongols' approach to dealing with the competing leadership classes. The Mongols practiced killing the ruling classes in order to subdue the general population, a technique used by other cultures as well. Survivors of the upper classes wrote the histories and expressed resentment of Mongol brutality toward them. Weatherford explores the Mongol treatment of the general population, meaning the peasants, the tradesmen, the merchants, under Mongol rule. He suggests their rule was less burdensome than that of European nobility due to lighter taxes, tolerance of local customs and religions, more rational administration, and universal education for boys. These benefits were enjoyed only by population who surrendered immediately to the Mongol invaders. Those populations that resisted could be massacred as a warning to the other towns and cities. So you see that the strategy of shock and awe is not from the Americans. It's a much older strategy. These massacres were a method of psychological warfare to alert those populations not yet conquered. The resulting terror helped color the historical portrayal of the Mongols. Since the Mongols were nomadic horsemen of the steppes, they were dependent on taxes from the subjugated peoples for wealth and luxury goods. Weatherford's book claims that the Mongols sought to increase that wealth by encouraging their subject to be more productive and enterprising instead of increasing the tax burden on them. They did this by sponsoring lucrative international trade. We know that under the Mongol, the Silk Road was open from one end to the other. He says that they encourage scientific advances, even if they were not themselves the source of scientific advances, of course, and improve agriculture and production methods. Many innovations came from the combination of technology from different cultures within their huge empire. I also want to, since I want to present it as something truly Eurasian, I want to remind a little bit the chronology of the Mongol by themselves, right? So once again, I remind that the Mongol name for Russia was Uluk Ulus, Uluk U-L-U-G, Ulus U-L-U-S, meaning the great imperial domain or the imperial princely domain. The other name that is more known to the Westerners is Antun Ordu. Okay, Antun Ordu means the golden military camp. So the golden horde in English. And I'm quite sure that all of you know that expression. So that golden horde was divided in two. West of the Volga River was the Gok Ordu, the blue horde, and east of the Volga River was the Akht Ordu, the white horde. And I would like to make a geographical parenthesis that might be interesting. I think that you all know the Red Sea and the Black Sea, right? It's because of some cultural features related to the Mongols and the Turk. For the Mongols and for the Turk, what is north is associated with the black color. What is south is red color. What is west is white. And what is east is blue. So imagine yourself at the center of Anatolia, okay, or at Constantinople. So north of Constantinople is the Black Sea, south of Constantinople is the Red Sea, west of Constantinople is the White Sea. But for the Westerner, the White Sea is better known as the Mediterranean Sea. And east of Constantinople is the Caspian Sea, but for the Turks and the Mongol is Gok Deniz, meaning the Blue Sea. So Kara Deniz, Kizin Deniz, Ak Deniz, and Gok Deniz. Black Sea, Red Sea, White Sea or Mediterranean Sea, and Caspian Sea or Blue Sea. So it has to do with Mongol and Turkic control features. So just before ending my presentation, I just want to remind very rapidly the genealogy of the Mongol imperial family. The man called Temujin was born in 1162 and died in 1227. He married a wife called Borte, B-O-R-T-E. She was born around 1161 and he died in 1230. Genghis Khan was his name, imperial name, universal sovereign between 1206 and 1227. Last time when I was speaking of 1204, I was cheating a little bit because I wanted someone to remind that 1204 was the sack of Constantinople by the Fourth Crusade. So I did not give the exact year of 1206. I said 1204, and Jerry got the right association. But Temujin was a universal ruler, Genghis Khan, between 1206 and 1227. The dynastic name Yuan has been created by his grandson Kublai Khan, who ruled from 1260 to 1294. And the Yuan dynasty ruled China between 1279 and 1368, so for about 90 years. The descendants of the Golden family live right now in China in the Inner Mongolia province. So they have a certain influence on their cousins of the country called Mongolia, because I'm sorry if I make one jump to the other, because I want to explain things from a very general perspective. The country called Mongolia is an excellent place for the shenanigans of the KFC Azayan, the Kakistocratic feudal conglomerate of the Anglo-Sino-American establishment. When the Chinese wanted the Russian to move their pipeline not to the east, but for power of Siberia too, but through Mongolia, it was because the Chinese wanted the Mongols of the country called Mongolia to benefit from the economic expansion of the region, and so they don't feel rejected in the grand scheme, okay? And the enders of their family, the descendants of the Golden family who ruled in Russia and China and Iran, can have a psychological influence over them. So in the grand endeavor of Eurasian integration, we can offer them economic candies like the pipeline, but we can also use the influence of their elder cousins who are Chinese citizens. Mongolia is a quite safe place for the great endeavor of the Eurasian integration, not only because of the economic candies that we can give them, but because of the influence of their elder cousins over them. That being said, so Genghis Khan had 4 sons, Jochi, and Jochi had 3 major, when I say 3 sons, they were not his only sons, okay, but the major sons who have done something in their life. So Jochi had 3 sons, so 3 grandsons of Genghis Khan, Batu Khan, Okda Khan, and Berke Khan. Those 3 Khan play a great role in the conquest of Russia. The second son of Genghis Khan was Chagatai. The third son of Genghis Khan was Ogodai, and he was the second emperor of the Mongol Empire between 1229 and 1241. And that Ogodai had a son called Guyuk, Guyuk, who was the third emperor of the Mongol Empire between 1246 and 1248. And the fourth son of Genghis Khan was called Tului, Tolui. And that Tului had two sons called Mongke, Mongke, who was the fourth emperor, 1251 to 1259. And the very well-known Kublai in the West, who ruled between 1260 and 1294 as the fifth emperor, and he created the Yuan dynasty in China between 1279 and 1368. And that Tului also had a son called Hulagu, Halagu, who was emperor of Persia or emperor of Iran, and who will create a lineage who will rule Iran for about a century. And that Hulagu will be very important because of the Mongol conquest to the west, the southwest, and it would help a lot the two tribes of the Oghuz Yapgu state, the Kayis tribe and the Kinnik tribe, who will create respectively the Ottoman Empire and the Seljuk Empire. So the adventure of the third and the creation of the Ottoman Empire, having lasted 6th century between 1299 and 1922, is very intimately associated with the imperial adventure of the Mongols. Okay, and I also want to mention that on May 31, 1254, there was the first religious debate of the Mongol Empire, having involved the Christians, the Buddhists, the Muslim, and other less well-known religion. Okay. I finished by mentioning what is called the Golden Ring cities. Okay, the Golden Ring cities is a group of 8 cities about 200 kilometers east of Moscow, which the most important two are Vladimir, created in 1108 by Vladimir Monomachos, and and the other one is Susdan, just north of Vladimir. And Yaroslav too was quite important. So Vladimir, the coat of arms of Vladimir is a crown lion in vertical position holding a grand cross, 200 kilometers east of Moscow. Susdan, the coat of arms is a crown bird. Rostov Veliki, a deer with golden antlers. Sergei Posad, a castle. Pereslav Zalewski, fish as a coat of arms. Kostroma, a ship. Ivanovo, a maiden. And Yaroslav on the Volga with coats of arms as a crown bear. I stop here my formal presentation because if you have questions or comments, it would be fun to have a discussion on that. Because, and let's not forget, I make that presentation as the royal way of Alexander Nevsky children, but it's related to what is happening right now, okay? Because what happened at the time involved China, Russia, and Iran. And what are the 3 major sovereign states who would be capable to bring down the KFC Azrael? Well, it's Russia, China, and Iran. So let's have a discussion on that relation between what happened 7 centuries ago and what is happening now. And I want to remind you also that Alexander Nevsky was doing a little bit what Vladimir Putin is doing right now in Ukraine, okay? And we have more or less the same crusaders or the descendants of those crusaders 7 centuries later. And what Ivan IV in Eisenstein film, when he said blah, blah, blah against the foreigners and etc., well, it's exactly the program of Vladimir Putin.
Thank you, Quan. And so yeah, let's open up for some discussion. Any takers for the first question, or to share a thought, even if you guys want. Gary, I know that you always have some thoughts for on these sorts of topics. Yeah, any insights you want to share?
No, the only thing I wanted to ask Quan was the colors. Black signifying north and red signifying so. I had read that that was also a tradition in ancient China, and maybe that's where it came from, for the Mongols. Is that true, Quan?
Absolutely, Jerry. Because for the Chinese, it's also related to a mythological animal. Okay, so the north is related to the black turtle. The south is related to the red bird, the symbol of the Zhou dynasty, who ruled China between 1046 and 256 BCE, even if their true rule was only between 1046 and 770 BCE, and from 770 BCE to 256, they were more control influencers and religious figures, let's say. To the east, you have the blue azure dragon, okay, because Gok is not exactly blue, it's blue azure, so it's bright blue with a tinge of green. And to the west, you have the white tiger. So exactly, it's directly from Chinese tradition, because the Mongol aristocracy, the most sophisticated of them, had the same culture that the Chinese aristocracy.
You got a question on the formation of the Dalai Lama, or the institution of the Dalai Lama as a system, in I guess it was like the 1390s or something, by one of the great grandkids of Genghis. Could you say anything about what was the strategy, or what was the thinking behind the creation of that, and the relationship between the Mongols and the Tibetan Dalai Lama system?
I have to admit that I'm a little bit embarrassed by that episode, but I would be faithful to history, and I would not hide some embarrassing fact. The Mongols are more sophisticated people than what most people think, especially in the West. They were perfectly aware that the Buddhism in Tibet was a shitload of mumbo jumbo. Okay, so because they know the true meditational Buddhist, which is something purer, okay? But sadly, the variant of Buddhism who went to Tibet was through some tantric sect of northern India. And the Mongol, being very wise ruler in terms of divide et impera, divide and rule, used those religious priests and their mumbo jumbo to maintain the control over the Tibetan populations. And when the Mongol Empire collapsed, the Ming Dynasty took care of China proper. They didn't have the time to take care of Tibet. And those mumbo jumbo just flourished till the 21st century. What can I say?
Mm. Mm. Yeah, thanks. Kelly.
Hey, Quan.
Hi.
Yeah, you're talking about the Mongols and that. I hear a lot of social media sites I go on. They talk about the mythical land of Tartaria. And is that the Mongols?
Yeah, there are two answers to that. First, the down-to-earth answer, the Tatar, Tatars, is the Russian names for the Mongol. Okay, it comes from a small tribe called the Dan. Okay, Dan. Okay, in Chinese, Dan. So that's the down-to-earth answer. Okay, it's a small tribe among the Mongol Confederation. And
I was going to say, like in some of these sites, they talk about the Tataria is like it's like they make it very mystical, like some grand society that's been kept from history. You know.
I know, and that's the second answer. The mythology of Tartaria. I am a down-to-earth person. I believe in myth, in facts, and in awareness. But when there is too much magic, it's not good. That's why I'm always coming back to my epistemological triangle. A good civilization is a civilization capable to live with myths, with facts, and with awareness. When you're too much in magic, wow, you know that a guy called Kunstler wrote a book maybe 20 years ago, which the title is Too Much Magic on the American Decline and stuff like that. So I am not promoting that kind of stuff because too much magic is not good. I invite everyone to go back to the epistemological triangle, which combine mythology, facts, and awareness.
Yeah, I agree. I just wanted to hear it from your mouth.
Thank you. All right, so Richard.
Yeah, you pointed out that China, Russia, and Iran are once again getting ready to defend themselves against Western aggression. There's a big difference this time, though, and that is with BRICS, they're endeavoring to put a permanent end to Western imperialism. So I thought that's an important point.
Absolutely. Was it your major point, or you have a
no?
Question
That's I just that was it. That was I think that. Thank you.
I think that your point is really outstanding, Richard, and I would like, with your permission, to develop a bit on that.
Sure.
Without the three major sovereigns, China, Russia, and Iran, and I apologize in advance if I'm clumsy in my choice of words, there would be no aristocratic oligarchies to be organized and to manage the resources and to prepare the plans in advance. Because if you remove those three states, okay, China, Russia, and Iran, I am really sorry, and I'm willing to say that I'm wrong, but there are no serious states on this planet capable to resist the KFC-Israel, okay? And I'm not making a Syria bashing now, okay? I know those people suffer a lot, and they were against overwhelming forces combining Turkey, the West, Saudi Arabia, etc. Okay, I want to start with that. But according to the mouth of His Excellency Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin himself during his 4 hours marathon dialogue with the Russian people, the city of Aleppo had 3 divisions of the Syrian Arab army, meaning 30,000 men, supposedly defending the city of Aleppo. And when there were 300 jihadis coming from the pocket of Idlib, controlled by the supposed neo-Sultan, this neo-Ottoman Sultan Erdogan, the 30,000 men did nothing at all against the 300 jihadis. I'm sorry if I'm not very loving here, but what can we do with that kind of people? 30,000 against 300. And they did nothing. Okay, that is why I said your point by mentioning BRICS is excellent, because now it's not only for Russia, China, Iran. It's for the whole mankind. Okay, because BRICS plus is a kind of symbol for all mankind. And once again, those people have been so much destroyed, so much torture, so much brainwash that maybe they don't have any spine or any cojones or any brains. But when I see stuff like 30,000 men not doing anything at all, when you have 300 jihadis coming to Aleppo, I say, my God, thanks God there are Russia, China, and Iran. Because without those three states and their respective aristocratic oligarchies, the planet would have already been the private properties of the multinational corporation coming from the KFC Azrael.
Well,
I think Richard has a follow-up.
Yeah, well, I mean, there was a deal made. Syria was just completely hollowed out economically. It just couldn't function really as a state. And so there were top generals who really weren't paying much attention to Assad. Assad really wasn't really ruling. And they just made a deal that Turkey is too strong, we're just going to melt away. And they ordered the troops to leave. They wanted to fight. So it was kind of complicated.
Well, Richard, I'm grateful for what you just said. It's kind of complicated, okay? But I'm probably unfair here. But imagine Alexander Nevsky giving excuses. Oh, we have the Mongol, and we were not capable to manage enough resources to go against the German crusaders. That's why we were not victorious at the battle on the ice, okay? I know I'm not loving, but those are excuses. Okay, there are people who are more capable, and there are people who are less capable. And once again, I repeat myself, without the aristocratic oligarchies from Russia, China, and Iran, the planet would have already been the private property of the corporation coming from the KFC Azrael.
Fair enough. Yuri. Oh, yeah, just take yourself off. There you are.
I just have an observation, and I don't know. I seem to be shadowed by Mackinder wherever I go, and I noticed that Ivan complained about his access to the sea being taken over by foreigners, in much the same way that Mackinder's geopolitical ideas still exist today. It just seems like he's eternal. You just can't get away from that guy. Well, it's just an observation. It's just an observation. The guy shadows me wherever I go. I see fucking Mackinder.
Yeah.
Just an observation.
Well, we should not call it the Mackinder theory. We should call it the Ivan Vassilievich theory.
There you go. But the point is that, you know, the outer lands, the access to the sea, just like Mackinder's theory of the land powers and the sea powers. It seems to be like everywhere I look, I see this repeating itself. It's kind of distressing. I think geopolitics should be made illegal.
But Yuri, if geopolitics cannot be made illegal because it's part of human nature.
I know.
And, geopolitics is
I'm making a joke, but you know,
it's
just a sort of frustration to see these things recycling. Like you brought up that Iran, Russia, and China are once again forming a sort of resistance. From 400 years earlier, or 700 years earlier? The same constellations are reforming again. It's fascinating, but it's also tiresome.
Well, maybe of course, you know that I'm coming back. I apply to myself the epistemological triangle.
I love that. I love that.
In the sense of mythology, facts, and awareness. This time, okay, maybe it's a little bit wishful thinking from me, for sure. I'm aware of it. But this time, I think that we have the winning combination because it is possible for the three sovereigns, if they are truly together, to control Eurasia. And once the fortress of Eurasia is under their management, the KFC ASEAN cannot go against them, especially that India, I'm absolutely sure that Vladimir Putin is playing a big role in this, is showing sign to wanting to make peace of China, at least on the diplomatic level. Okay,
Yeah.
I don't expect the Indian ruling class and the Chinese ruling class to be kumbaya soon, but we don't need the kumbaya. We just need normal diplomatic relations, and that the Indian elite grows a spine. And once again, I'm unfair, but I think that Vladimir Putin play a big role in the growth of a spine of the Indian elite. And you know that the Japanese are moving closer to the Chinese too. And you know that when Yoon Suk Yeol from South Korea tried to declare martial law, the South Korean members of parliament broke the windows to enter into the parliament in order to vote the annulment of the martial law, because they are perfectly aware that Yoon Suk Yeol was doing that under the order of the American overlords. And they are perfectly aware that their future economic development is not with the KFC ASEAN, but with China, Russia, and Iran.
Well, it's powerful resistance in spite of the fact that Syria was rolled over.
Yeah. And once again, I will stop after this because I don't want to be I have a reputation of a non-loving person, so I have to defend it. Some people have been so castrated that we cannot rely on them as fighting companions. They wouldn't betray us because they don't have the cojones and the spine. And I think it was a good thing that they have been eliminated, because if they were our fighting companions in the next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, it would be worse, because it would have given them the possibility of betraying us in 10, 20, 30 years.
Yeah, I fully understand that. I always look to the unintended consequences, or what are so-called unintended consequences, that from a certain altitude, you can look at these local tragedies, but from a certain altitude, things may turn out very, very different than what the trajectory is. Yeah, there should be a God made to unintended consequences.
Well, there's a group of people called KFC ASEAN who will need a very long lesson on unintended consequences.
Yeah, they don't seem to learn.
Okay, we're gonna move on to Jerry follow-up. Jerry.
Oh yes, I actually had a question, but because of what Yuri said, I have a different question I wanted to ask. Because this Mackinder stuff and his idea of, whoever controls the heartland controls the world. See, I think Mackinder is totally wrong on that. It's not a fight for the so-called heartland. It's a fight for the Silk Road, whoever controls the Silk Road. And the KFC is totally freaked out today because, as Quan has said, this alliance between China and Russia with India and Iran, they're totally dominating the world because of their building up of the new Silk Road. Anyway, Quan, I wanted your comment on that thought of mine to see if I'm on the right track.
Yeah, I think that what they don't want, okay, what they want is that they just want, because they are thalassocracy, okay, they are sea power. They just want developed cities on the borders near the shores of the sea, of the ocean, that they can come to loot and to plunder as they wish, okay? That is precisely the role of the aircraft carriers. But because of technological advancement, okay, because of the hypersonic missiles, okay, a 5 billion aircraft carrier can be a sitting duck just using 3 hypersonic missiles let's say, costing 5 million each. Okay, so 15 million against 5 billion. You see that the ratio of cost to benefit is not very good for the KFC as I am. So even that now, even if there is no development of the hinterland, their old strategy is obsolete now because of the hypersonic missiles. But if we connect all the hinterlands, it means that because the higher idea is nobler, it's not only a question of geopolitics precisely, Yuri, in the sense that sadly geopolitics is always part of the game, but there is a higher and nobler intention. And the higher and the nobler intention is to bring everyone to the economic prosperity and the cultural development. Okay, one thing that all of us in this group know is that when the European colonized Africa, they always build railways from a mine to a port, okay, to extract the riches of Africa. But they never build railroads to connect the inside of Africa to allow international trade between African countries, between African nations. So now what is happening, of course, is geopolitical, but also at a second level is to bring everyone to economic prosperity and cultural development, and occasion for me to make some propaganda for China. Let's not forget that Xi Jinping in 2021 offered the idea of global development initiative, and the next year, 2022, of global security initiative, and the next year, 2023, of global civilization initiative. And at the end of 2023, global artificial intelligence governance initiative. And let's not forget that Vladimir Putin and himself, Xi Jinping, promised to each other that they would work together to create the Eurasian global Eurasian security architecture that hopefully will be the core for the global security architecture. So once again, all this is interrelated, of course.
Matthew Thomas, are you still there? Oh, and then we got Monty. I just saw your hand. Okay, so yeah, Matthew. Matthew, by the way, you'd have to take yourself off of mute. Or here, he actually wrote out his question. So Matthew says, for Quan and Matt, how much of today's Russia is still influenced by the work of Leibniz, if any? Also, Quan, thank you for such a wonderful talk. I learned a lot. So, Quan, you want to...
you have the honors for the, you have the honors for that question, Matt.
Okay. I can definitely say there's absolutely an influence, an enduring influence of Leibniz in the Russian academia. I had the pleasure of being invited to speak at a futuristics conference a few years back with Cynthia, and in one of the roundtable discussions, there must have been about 20 scientists from the Russian Academy of Sciences who all delivered little 5-minute presentations. I was allowed to speak a little bit. I spoke too fast for the translator, as I discovered. I do that. But what I did gather was that at least 7 or 8 of them directly in their presentations on policy paradigms for Russian science directly referenced Leibniz, and 3 of them situated Leibniz and Vernadsky as a direct continuity as the real heirs of or the foundation of Russian scientific thinking. So that was very, very nice for me to hear that, and they spoke quite well about it. So that I know that in when it comes to statecraft and political policymaking within Russia, the Academy of Sciences plays a very big role, whereas the parallel academies of science in France or in Germany, or especially in the United States, don't really have that kind of clout and influence on policy. So yeah, that is there. It's also clouded with a lot of there's a lot of theosophical spin-off groups and cosmists and stuff around Max Theon and others who have a lot of influence within Bergenov and others who have a lot of influence within the transhumanist sort of more esoteric networks that Vernadsky and Leibniz were at war with. So that's also a factor that sort of muddies the waters a bit and makes things a bit confused. But definitely there's a strong connection. So I don't know, that's just my observation. I don't know, Quan, if you want to chime in on that.
Yeah, I think that at the core, Russian is always inhabited by the spirit of Leibniz. At the operational level, I think that there are many complicated stuff related to the deep state in Russia, which is still more alive than in China. I think in China, we can say for sure that President Xi Jinping make a big draining of the swamp, okay? Because draining of the swamp should not be the trademark for Trump, should be the trademark for Xi Jinping. Because between 2012 and 2012 and 2022, during that 10 years period, the Xi Jinping make a big cleaning up of the Shanghai clique. And I would say that from 2022, I can say that there is no operational deep state in China. The operation in Ukraine helped a lot Vladimir Putin to make a cleaning up too in Russia, the fifth, the sixth, and who God knows what columns. But I'm not an expert on Russian affairs, but I risk to say that probably the deep state is a little bit more operational in Russia than in China right now, 2024.
Yeah, exactly. Didn't the former governor of the Bank of China recently get handed down a suspended death sentence like a few weeks ago for engaging in massive corruption and fraud?
Yes, it's ongoing, and let's not forget that the Shanghai clique. Okay, first I want to bring a nuance to that notion of Shanghai clique. When Jiang Zemin was the supreme leader of China between 1989 and 2002, it was the moment that China was opening up her economy to the world, and there were many legitimate connections with international finance, right? So let's not put that entirely black, okay? It's gray. But within those connections with international finances, some people took advantage, let's say. And that's why the cleaning up was needed between 2012 and 2022.
Mm-hmm. Right. Monty.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, thank you very much. I happened to be on a Zoom call this morning with Doctors Against Genocide, which was a live broadcast out of Gaza. It was very, very good. I actually posed a similar question or comment to Norm Finkelstein. And it's somewhat of the following: in the need to address the ideology which is driving these concurrent wars. In other words, what we're happening in Gaza is obviously genocide. And it's very obvious that militarily, the Israelis are not defeating them on the ground. And also when Ukraine, militarily, Ukraine is losing badly. So what they're referring to is outright genocide and terrorism. I think we can witness this by the airliner and the sinking of the Russian ship, and God knows the threat of nuclear war and so forth. So getting back to what Putin addressed as his objective and against this ideology, Putin stated his objective in Ukraine was number one, the defeat of Ukraine militarily. In other words, a demilitarization and neutrality of Ukraine. But number two, the denazification of Ukraine. And I think he's addressing in particular this ideology, this denazification of Ukraine. Is not just the Azov battalion and the right wing, but this is really a proxy war against NATO, which represents that same ideology. Overtly insofar as their militarization, but covertly insofar as their secret armies and their lust for terrorism. Can you comment on that, or do you see a correlation between that and what's happened in the past with these wars against this type of supremacist ideology?
Yeah, but I would say that it's not only ideology; it's their modus operandi. Okay, and the way I understand that is that the KFC Israel has always used the same strategy and the same tactics that has been given a name 20 years ago. But the name is not important. What is important is the strategy. And the name which has been given 20 years ago is the Rumsfeld, the Sebrowski doctrine. Okay, Rumsfeld, according to the guy Rumsfeld, Donald Rumsfeld. And Sebrowski is from a rear admiral called Arthur Sebrowski, to whom Dick Cheney gave the responsibility of renew the framework of the American army. Okay, and that Rumsfeld-Sebrowski doctrine is exactly what you said, meaning that they would use useful idiots, precisely, could be Nazis, could be Islam or Muslim terrorists, and by using those people, they will create as much chaos and disorder as possible across the whole planet. And the eschatological mumbo-jumbo that is in circulation right now, the second coming of Christ and so on, is to increase a notch the emotional impact on those people and on the general population, so that the Middle East would be even more in chaos. And they try to do the same in East Asia. Okay, and here I would be a little bit biased. The Koreans and the Japanese seems to be a little bit smarter than other people on the planet. They understood perfectly that what is happening right now between the overlords, the KFC Israel and themselves, is not at all for their own good. Because, and I want to commend them, because South Korea and Japan are military colonies of the KFC Israel, okay? As Germany is a military colony of the KFC Israel, meaning the state having the least political autonomy, okay? Because you can have a client state, you can have a vassal state, but the level of least political autonomy is what is called a military colony. And why I mention it is to praise the Japanese and the South Koreans. They are at the lowest level of political autonomy, and they are capable all the same to resist, because they are capable to see where is their true interest. And in case you don't know, the central military command of South Korea is by Americans, not by South Koreans. And it's the same for the Japanese. And I'm not sure, but I'm quite sure it must be the same for the German. And maybe for the Italians too. So if you see a movement of rebellion in military colonies, that is an excellent sign for the sovereigns.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm having a little bit of trouble with my hearing, but what are you referring to with KFC?
Okay, Kakistocratic, feudal conglomerate of the Anglo-Zio-American establishment. Okay, a kakistocracy is a power structure by the worst people intellectually speaking, and morally speaking, and spiritually speaking.
Okay, thank
you. Yeah,
it's even worse. Sorry.
I was going to say the Kekistocratic feudal conglomerate. We really have to make that part of the lexicon. You're doing good. You're doing your part to transform our language or upgrade our language. But that really has to become something we all associate and use. I love it. All right. So I noticed that Jerry had a follow-up question on the Ming, and we might have time. I think Richard, did you already ask that follow-up question, or do you have another one? You have another one. Okay, so actually, let's do Richard, because I saw you put in your follow-up request first, and then Jerry, and then we'll wrap it up for today. So, Richard.
Okay, 2 comments. First about Syria. So you have Erdogan wants to recreate the Ottoman Empire, and he's got the most power in the region there. Israel wants to create Greater Israel, and the United States insists on supporting the Kurds and maintaining a presence and stealing the oil. So rather than being a setback for the axis of resistance, it may be that a quagmire is being created that will weaken Israel, etc. I know you want to comment on that, but let me bring up the second point, which is in some sense off topic here, but the subject of nuclear war. One issue I've heard no one discussed, and I just want to get this out in the ether, is there going to be a role for directed energy weapons, like the microwaves from space that they tested in Maui and things like that? So I don't know if anybody wants to comment on that, but I just want to get it out there. Thank you.
Okay. So you're perfectly right. I think like you. That's why I said that it's a good thing that Syria has been lost, but I don't know if lost is the right word, okay? Because the Russians still have their 2 bases of Tartus and Latakia, and Meymin to be precise, near Latakia, and Latakia in English. The other thing is that I wish Erdogan was an Ottoman emperor. Sadly for me, he's far to be an Ottoman emperor. He's rather the local mafia boss. So because if he had the greatness of an Ottoman emperor, he could have joined the sovereign of China, Russia, and Iran. And the work of bringing down the KFC ASEAN would have been much easier. But that being said, concerning the energy weapons, I don't know about the Russians, but China has energy weapons too. And I don't know if you're aware of it, but on December 26th, so just 3 days ago, on the 131st birthday of Mao Zedong's birth in 1893, December 26, 1893, China just presented to the world the first 2 6th-generation fighters. So maybe I have a flippant attitude that I have to be careful with my attitude, but I am not impressed by the boasting of the KFC ASEAN of their weapons and so on, because if they have such weapons, they would have used them already in Ukraine, okay? Because let's not forget the geostrategic purposes of Ukraine. The KFC ASEAN, if it's acknowledged that it has lost in Ukraine, it is the clear proclamation to the world that their imperialistic structure is finished. Because if it's with Afghanistan, if it's with Vietnam, if it's with Yemen, if it's with any small countries, they could have said, oh, we just apply our Rumsfeld-Zebrowski doctrine, we destroy the country and we move out, we finish our endeavor. But with Russia, if they move out, it doesn't mean that they just finished the endeavor of Rumsfeld-Zebrowski doctrine. It means that they lost. Okay, so they cannot afford to get out of Ukraine. And that wouldn't be one of the place that they wouldn't die. And the other place that they wouldn't die is in Syria precisely. That's why I'm absolutely ecstatic with your comment, because Israel is perfectly, once again, you reset unintended consequences. They are so hubristic that they don't even have the imagination for 3 months in advance. They think that they can control the brainwashed jihadist, but they will discover in 3, 4, 6 months that those jihadis will not be their obedient servants.
I see a few heads nodding there, so I think you struck a chord. All right, so let's give it over to Jerry to wrap up today's session. Go for it, Jerry.
Okay, thanks. Okay, I hope I don't ask a question that requires a 2-hour answer from Quan, but maybe you could do it another. But in my reading that I had to do for my presentation, which you covered quite well, on Alexander Nevsky and his father, and how they weren't suicidal. They made an alliance with the Mongols, which gave them time to build a state, to build a Russian state. And I haven't gone into it, but I'm thinking that they actually had a help from what was going on in the eastern end of Asia with China, because the Mongols also, I think they controlled the Yuan dynasty in China. And around the same time when the Russians are finally stopping their vassalage to the Mongols, so was China. And I read this wonderful story about the beginning of the Ming Dynasty. The person who founded it, apparently he was an orphan and from a very poor background, and he rose to found the Ming Dynasty. But anyway, if you could just say a little bit about what China was doing to also free themselves from the Mongols at the same time Russia was, which I think may have helped each other. I hope it doesn't require a 2-hour answer. Otherwise, we could do another presentation.
No, I would manage to answer in 5 minutes, maximum 10 minutes. First, you're right. The creator of the Ming Empire was of peasant origin. The 3 great dynasties from China, which have been created by peasants, are the Han Dynasty, the 400 years long Han Dynasty, 206 BCE to 220 CE. The Ming Dynasty, 1368 to 1644. And the Red Dynasty, having begun in 1949 to the far future. So, heaven chooses the son that he wants. Right? So even if most of the imperial dynasty in China have been created by noblemen, but the 3 that have been created by peasants were 3 very great dynasties. That's for one. 2, the Mongols, as long as you don't resist them and you can take them by the soft side of their personality, you can, let's say, you can live with them, okay? Because that was the conclusion of the Russians. It's better to deal with the Mongols than with the German Crusaders. So the Chinese, of course, were too far away to deal with the German Crusaders, but the Chinese realized quite fast that as long that you don't oppose them, it is relatively easy to deal with them. And the Chinese introduced them to the more sophisticated and refined ways of living. And as I said in the beginning, the upper crust of the Mongol nobility, even before the conquest of China in 1279, were already used to Chinese luxury goods. So it was relatively easy to soften them, let's say. And they stay in China for 3 generations, about 90 years, from 1279 to 1368. So I'm not saying that their rule has been an easy one, but it was not that difficult for the Chinese aristocracy to deal with them. And even in the second half of their rule, meaning from 1330, there were a lot of Chinese aristocrats governing the Chinese part of the empire for them. Okay, because you know that a little bit what they have done with Alexander Nevsky and his family, right? Because the Mongol never ruled directly Russia. They were rather the overlords of the Russian principalities. As long as you pay the taxes and you don't make trouble, they just leave you alone. And that's why when Ivan Kalita, the grandson of Alexander Nevsky, got that position of tax collectors for the Mongol, it was in 1328. It was the beginning of the rise of Moscow, because it was the branch of the Russian princes who knew perfectly how to deal with the Mongols.
Cool. Well, thank you, Quan. Thank you for this excellent introduction, or continuation of our introduction into this chapter of universal history, and also which has very, very practical application and considerations of today's geopolitical circumstances. So, very, very high value. And we don't necessarily have a class next week as of this moment. However, there's a few ideas bubbling, and a few people have said maybe. So we probably will have something this coming Sunday, and I'll keep people posted for that. Definitely, we're going to have an American system introductory set of classes over the course of about 7 weeks shortly. But before that, we'll have Uwe Alschner doing something on Moses Mendelssohn's defense of Leibniz coming up in 2 weeks, and a lot of things just to keep our spirits, our minds as edified going into this storm as they need to be. So I appreciate this so much, just getting to have these very mentally and spiritually uplifting experiences every Sunday. Quan, thank you for doing your part to keep the fire going, and thank you everybody for sharing, and we'll see you all next week.
Ciao.
Bye.